Hello, everyone, and welcome back to one of these fun interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me a guest from, I guess, the West Coast. These are always the fun part of where they're from.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm in California.
to get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the game we're here to talk about?
Hi, I'm called Patrick's Parabox. It's a puzzle game with a unique recursive mechanic. So you push boxes around, but you can also enter into boxes, and you can from there you can enter into another box and another box. It's kind of a recursive modular system. So it's a puzzle game based around that mechanic. I've been working on that for a few years now, and it's my first commercial game, and we're right at the end of development, so I'm pretty excited about that.
I was going to say, we'll get to it, but it sounds at least relatively soon to release. So immediately the first thing that when I was looking at games and the looks caught my eye was, I'm generally curious because the only game I can think that somewhat looked like this, and I'm not saying look exactly like it, but it's the thing that came to my mind was Thomas is Alone. I was kind of curious if anything like that gave you inspiration even from like a look point of view.
Oh yeah, Thomas was alone. Well, I think I like games like that give inspiration that I can make a game using programmer art, just using solid shapes and colors and particles and stuff, and it'll look good enough. So that's what I've gone for, and I think that's working all right.
Which is probably what I saw when I say that looking at it, just because that definitely feels like that's what that game definitely was, at least from an art point of view. So naturally we have to jump into this recursive mechanic piece because obviously you have gifts kind of floating around. There's a demo out there of the game. Why on this, right? Because to me, as a background, I come from a program background, I'm looking at this and going, A, it's a pain in the ass. I could just tell people it looks really simple, and that's what's really impressive about it, but it's probably a pain in the ass. But what were you playing, or like what were you messing around with that came the thing that came to mind?
Yeah, so this came out of I was in college, and there's a game development club, and which I love, hang out with everyone there. And I was thinking about having a project to do for show and tell there, and I thought, well, I have this old prototype from a few years ago where it was going to be a two-player thing where one player was like inside the boxes and one player was outside the boxes pushing them around, if that makes sense. And so for the club meeting, I thought, well, what if I try to rework the code to make it more modular as a demonstration? This is as a pure programming demonstration to show something to the code to the club. And then from there, it turned out, well, this actually from that club meeting.
That's very interesting. I'm assuming the club prototype looked a lot different than this did, at least fundamentally.
Yeah, I can show you a screenshot later, but much simpler.
Like, cause one of the things I like about this is, like, there is a level of complexity. You can look at the art, but like broadly speaking, it is as you said, programmer art, or at least some version of it, where like it's kind of what's the age old like writing joke of like, I don't have time to write a short story, I write a long one. It kind of reminds me of that kind of art of like, it's art that if you don't know it takes a lot of time, it doesn't look like it, but that's what makes it impressive. So what kind of you're going through that then and trying to start crafting this from prototype to game? What was kind of your things you wanted to explore? Obviously, you wanted to explore more mechanically about this game. But was there anything else of like either you wanted to be like, oh, I wanted to work on this difficulty curve, or other like things you wanted players to get out of this experience?
So at the beginning, it was just a lot of experimentation. I thought it wasn't going to be a pure puzzle game. I thought it was going to be like some sort of maybe a stealth element, or maybe a strategy element. Maybe it'd be a two-player game. Maybe it'd be an action game with timing elements. But then as I just worked on the code some more and realized, oh, I should refactor this to make this mechanic more consistent. And oh, there's a cool mechanic where you can have when you enter and exit boxes instead of just staying on the same level and transferring between boxes on that level. Then I realized, oh, this should be a pure puzzle game. I think that's what's most natural. And I was also inspired by games. I was playing Steven Sausage Roll around that time, which I dearly love that game. And that was an inspiration to me. Like, you can make a pure puzzle game out of these kind of mechanics.
Puzzle games are always interesting to me because you have to find that. I feel like you have to find that right balance. As much as I hate that word, because in other games it's like, oh, a puzzle game with the story, like the story lets you like somewhat rely on the hook, or if there's other things in there, like you have to solely rely off this as like people must just really like the activity as the hook. Did you have trouble kind of during development of that, kind of keeping that in mind and making sure that like that was good enough for players to enjoy the experience?
I did make an attempt or two at trying to add some additional hook, like some kind of a narrative or some kind of like a light narrative or story or goal or something, but it ended up not working because I'm not very good at that. And also, I just realized, oh, it just stands on its own. So I kind of got lucky. The puzzles just kind of, the mechanics kind of stand on their own.
Yeah, that's very lucky because we've all heard stories or you've seen
like,
horror stories of
yeah.
like this is just a one thing, and you're like, yeah, great, but I don't want to do this for 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, the mechanics kind of naturally dictate the length of the game sometimes. Like some mechanics, the game can only be 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, however long it ends up being. And then Parabox just naturally ended up, it just ends up you can make a full-length commercial game out of it.
So what are you kind of defining as a full-length commercial game? So obviously being puzzles, so it's a little bit in the air time-wise, but like if a player sits down and like plays all the levels and beats them, what should a player kind of expect from this experience-wise?
About your, I don't know, average puzzle game you might, although I haven't decided on exact price point finalized yet. Yeah, it's hard to say. Not that you would pay money for it. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to quantify this because I'm so close to it.
Yeah, obviously, and also with you, it's the issue of either I'm trying to go slow, so you're artificially slowing your time, or you're playing it at your actual speed, which will probably be 10 times faster than a new player, because you're like, well, obviously I see the puzzle, I wrote it.
Yeah, I guess I can say there's about 300 puzzles currently, more than 300 puzzles, and players might take, I don't know, 10 hours if you're average, or maybe a lot less than that if you're really good. So it depends on the player, but that's about some estimates.
So that's actually probably a good length, I would say. Like, that's not...
Yeah.
Even if we're going to say it's faster and it ends up being like 5 or 6, I still think that's not an offensive length by any stretch, right?
That's satisfactory.
I was going to say, I'm kind of curious, because there's been a whole, I think, recent hullabaloo about, coming back up, about the whole Steam refund policy in indie games to be like puzzle or story games. Did you keep that in mind while you're making this? Like, making sure you hit behind these, like, Steam thresholds of, like, I think it was 2 hours for Steam, to make sure that the players still felt they had a lot of content left, to make sure you didn't hit this roadblock of, like, people just playing most of the game and just refunding it because they feel like it?
I never really think about that. I guess for this game, it's not really that applicable because it's either you like it or you don't. And I feel like I'll hook people if they bought the game, I think I'll hook them pretty well. So I never really thought about that.
No, that's lucky, and I think it's a good way to think about it. It's just been one of those things I'm always curious how different developers are tackling, because I'm on the side of, I think Steam's policy is probably too loose. I think it hurts developers, especially of smaller games, a lot more than the purpose it's going for. So I'm always just really curious when you see different developers how they handle that problem, whether they think of it or not, or whether the game just kind of naturally solves it.
Hmm.
So let's kind of dig in then. So obviously a player will
My game just naturally doesn't have that problem.
Mm-hmm. I'll say so obviously your game player hops into a level, they take the block and they have to then get them to these end goals, kind of. Do you mind talking through probably like one of the early levels where you've probably on top of your head kind of how that looks like for a player, kind of like does a player tend to spend 30 seconds on a level just so players have a better idea, kind of this gameplay loop besides just videos that you could find of it?
Yeah, so I was inspired by the panel puzzles in The Witness, which are they're kind of very short ideas that come in succession. So a lot of puzzles can be 30 seconds, they can be a minute, a few minutes. But puzzles that take longer than a few minutes, I try to make those optional. So the flow of the game is there's this big linear path through the game of like somewhat easy puzzles, and then there's a bunch of optional puzzles that you unlock as you go. And those can take a lot longer. And that's kind of a natural way to structure things.
That makes sense. So, kind of, what is your example then of these optional puzzles inside of a level? Obviously, the I think the natural puzzle makes a lot more sense, but like, how do you kind of structure these with these optional things?
Well, how I approached it was at the beginning of development or toward the the first half, I was like, well, I just want to see what I can do with these mechanics, and you just I made a bunch of puzzles, and then maybe about halfway through, I started thinking about, okay, how am I going to organize these? And then I figured out, okay, these ones are going to be required. This one's going to be optional because it's really interesting, but it's too hard or takes too long. Um, this one's going to be required because even if it's hard, I have to make it required. And maybe I'll make an easier version of that puzzle to really better teach you it because it's such an important concept. So there's a bunch of things like that where once I figured out the interesting interactions and things like that, then I figured out like, okay, how do I lay these out in a sequence that makes sense for people to go through? Um, yeah.
No, that actually that makes a lot of sense. It's just one of those like with these games that, as I said before, like it's interesting to me from a sense of how hard it is to like get players into these hooks kind of. So I'm kind of curious, so do you view this as like players should be going through the game as like taking the optional puzzles as they come up, or the optional objectives as they come up, or do you view this as like now there's a chance for a player to come back to a level maybe they tried earlier and they could do it later once they've kind of gained more knowledge of how the system works? Like how do you view kind of that optimal play experience?
The one advantage of doing the optional puzzles along the way in a bunch of little pockets, very frequent pockets, is that if you're a really good puzzle solver and you want to solve everything as you go, which some playtesters have done, you can do that. Or if you just want to give them a fair shake and then move on, or if you want to skip most of them because you're tired that day or whatever, you could do that too. So that's a nice advantage of doing the optional puzzles.
That's really like it's. I feel like it sounds like, at least from your confidence, that you've come up with a system that gives players kind of this smooth kind of come in pop out game. Are you viewing? Because to me, this feels like the type of game that if I was trying to sell to people, I would say, oh, this is the games are perfect when you have like those 15, 20 minutes when you need a break. Is that how you're trying to view this game to people, or do you view this as like them sitting down like as a longer experience?
People have told me that it's a great game about. I don't really play games that way. I usually try to sit down and play them, but I guess it works both ways, so I'm happy about that.
Then that's also great. I'd argue too, obviously if it works for both types of players, because it's probably a little bit better than that way. So I'm gonna hit you with the obvious thing. So this is one of those games to me that obviously you're starting on Steam. You got some traction from Steam. It's gonna come out relatively soon. Um, is there any plans in your future of that to port it to something like Switch or iPad, where it feels like this might be a good?
You cut out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, is there any future in which you view this game as like next going to some new platform like Switch or iPad or tablet because of the nature of this type of puzzle game?
Yeah, ports are something I'm definitely thinking about. I'm only doing PC at launch just to make my life a little simpler, but I will. That's definitely something on my mind.
Perfect.
I
No,
will be
that I was gonna say
announcing that when I do.
yeah, I was gonna say that makes a lot of sense. I assume has to probably do with the amount of response this game gets and traction and all that fun stuff. But this definitely feels.
That's the main thing. I want to see how much response it gets.
Hmm. I was like, this definitely feels like the type of game that I personally would like. Be like, oh, this is like the I'm on. I don't know if trains anymore because COVID. On something and like or plane eventually or whatever, and it's like, oh, I have some time. Versus me sitting. I don't really love puzzle games on the computer sometimes, just because that's usually not why I'm there. So I just find like this is definitely a game that you find home in these more portable or couch-based platforms.
Yeah, for sure. I could. Forms.
Perfect. Well, I was gonna say, Patrick, I think that is really kind of talking to you about it. Because obviously it's a game I feel like people should go check out themselves in a lot of ways. So just to clarify, then, are you sticking with the game? Is in theory coming out in 2021, which is currently what it says on Steam, or do you still have a little more breathing room beyond that?
My goal right now is 2021. I really want to get it out then, but I haven't done a release date yet. So there's a demo on Steam if anyone wants to play it.
Yeah, so they should check out then Patrick's Parabox, which I want to say I want to say like Paradox or Paradise. So interesting tongue twister you gave to me right there.
You're not the only one. This is Paradox.
Yeah, so Patrick's Parabox. Parabox is para, then box, one word. On Steam, you can wishlist it right now. You can go check out, you just said, the demo right now. Has links to, looks like, your Twitter, your website. Is there any other spot people should be going to look for the game or information about it?
No, that's right.
Well, Patrick, to close us out, I will give you the last, whatever you need right here. What is your closing pitch to people of why they should go check this game out when it comes out?
I think it's going to be a good puzzle game, which, I don't know, it's hard for me to pitch this game, but if you like puzzle games, I think you'll like this one. Because I like puzzle games and I like this one. And I'm realizing how silly that sounds. But that's, I don't know if I have anything more intelligent to say other than that.
Perfect. Well, you heard him here, folks. If you like puzzle games and you like currently free demos on Steam, it's a game you should go wishlist and check out. Because also, trust me, wishlisting games costs you nothing and helps developers. Would you say a ton? I'd say a ton.
It helps. I would appreciate if you wishlist games. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Patrick, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks. Bye.
This episode is partially brought to you by the Humble Choice program. Did you know Humble Bundle has a great monthly subscription service that lets you get a ton of video games every single month? That's right, from plans range from $5 to $20 a month, you get a hold of a bunch of free games they have available to you. And you could use our code down in the description below to go and sign up. It would help our podcast and help you see what great games are available for you this month.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to these fun interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike, and today with me a special guest from somewhere nearish to me in the world. To get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the game we're here to talk about?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rafael Vasquez, Rafa for short. I'm an indie game dev in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm working on a game called Puppet Master: The Shadow Government Simulator, which is a turn-based strategy game where you are a secret society, you are the Illuminati or the Templars, and you're taking over countries, subverting them via bribery, seduction, intimidation, etc.
You've answered my initial question immediately. Because I always like pull up like the Steam page and all that stuff, right? So it's on my other monitor.
Right.
And I remember your game being called the Shadow Government Simulator. I'm like, I'm positive this is a new game. I open up Steam and it says Puppet Master, and I go, am I looking at the right game?
Yeah. What's happening right now is that because we're in a state where the game is mostly complete, I've been doing a lot of experimentation with the marketing of it. Okay, and just especially in capsule image on Steam page, the trailers, I've been iterating and just trying out each week like a different combination of words, different images, and seeing which one performs best. It's a bit of like the hidden side of indie development, which doesn't get that much attention, is that it's not only about making the game, but it's also about being able to sell it. And there's a lot of work that has to go into just making sure that that Steam page is engaging, that people understand what the game's about, and that includes the title of the game.
Completely agree. It's the age-old joke that if you're an indie dev, if you work 40 hours a week, you worked on your game 5 hours a week. Because it's just 1,000 things to take care of.
That's so true.
But no, that was just the first thing I noticed this morning. I'm like, I know this is the right game, but this is... So yeah, so as you've said, so this is a game that is about you being a secret society and kind of everything goes with it. I'm kind of curious, why did you decide that's kind of the route you wanted to go with this game? Kind of, is it just always you've had interest in these kind of weird things that people talk about, like, exist in the underbelly of society? Did you think there's something cool you could put on its head with that? Like, why did you go kind of down that road?
It's actually a pretty interesting question because it did not start that way. To answer your question, I've always been a fan of kind of like the X-Files types of conspiracy, Area 51, aliens. Since I was a kid, Deus Ex is a good example of a game that was really heavily into that. But the game itself didn't start that way. This game actually started as a Cold War KGB versus CIA kind of actually a real-time strategy game back in the day. It was basically you were going to be one of these secret agencies, and the idea of like, subverting a nation is still there. That was part of the core. But it was going to be in this Cold War competition. However, as I started scoping out the type of work that was needed to be done, I realized that it was going to be a lot of explanation narrative work in order to explain, okay, why are you in this country right now? What are you doing? And I had to start looking for another theme. Eventually, I landed up on the idea of specifically the Illuminati. The idea of the Illuminati is that you don't really need to explain why they want to control the world. Right? It's what the Illuminati does. It's just something that people already understand intuitively, that secret societies try to dominate the world. That's their thing. We've seen that in many types of media. We've seen that in many types of games, but we've always seen it from the other point of view, right? We're always trying to stop them. And I thought it would have been a nice inversion of the trope of, okay, well, what does it feel to be on the other side? What does it feel to be the organization and to, try and be the one who conquers the world? So that's where the specific theme came from.
So that's interesting, and I think that is probably a valid. I'm trying to think phrasing a valid evolution of these kind of Cold War games as we get further and further out of Cold War, or that media becomes more saturated. I think is obviously this shadow government idea. So I've got to ask the obvious question, right? So the shadow government game, and we live in an era of probably conspiracy theories. Probably they always existed, but like they're more public now than ever.
Yeah.
How did you kind of decide to walk that fine line of true conspiracy theory to true conspiracy theory that exists in the real life? Like there are obviously like people being like, oh, we're ran by like lizard people, whatever. Kind of like, did you aim more towards real life conspiracy theories, or did you try to make sure that like even in this fictional world, it's viewed away from reality of like what people are saying and who are part of these groups or people who think these groups exist?
Yeah, it definitely caught me by surprise. When I was developing the game, I've been working on the game for several years. It was not intended to be as close to the zeitgeist as it ended up being. And when it did happen, as you mentioned, it is walking a fine line. I decided to stick with it, but I was going to do it basically more on the amorphous kind of secret society angle of conspiracy, as opposed to anything that is really like contemporary. I do like the historical aspects of secret societies. I find them fascinating when you look at like the Freemasons or the assassins, or like the mystique they create around them is really interesting, and find that really fun. But I do find it more on the like historic academic side, and that's something that I kind of wanted to lean on. Now the game is not historical in the sense that it's not it's not meant to be in the far past. It is meant to be more or less contemporary. And the reason for that is also part of the evolution of the game. It is just much easier for me as a lone developer to bring out assets. If you look at the game, I use FMVs quite a bit. And these full motion videos just exist more in the contemporary era than they exist in historical eras.
Yeah, I agree. So immediately when you picture like conspiracy theory videos, I picture like it's always some FMV guy who's like in front of the worst green screen or like has the camera directly on his forehead.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, that is. I think it's a tough like balancing act. It just has to be followed here, just because like you're like it's fun to kind of bleed into like the reality of what people saying, but like that goes you down to a very dangerous road very quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah, no, I mean, I have had to be very careful with, for example, marketing the game on Twitter or on Facebook. I do get sometimes flack, but it's just all sorts of flack from all sorts of people. Like every person associates conspiracies with like a particular type of person, but the truth is that they exist everywhere, right? They exist in different kinds of nations, and there are different kinds of cultures have different conspiracies as well. And the moment you start mentioning it, like people's the hair on their back start springing up, and it is a fine line. But so far, I feel that at least according to like the community that we formed on Discord, they're pretty awesome. They haven't been fear mongering. They haven't been like trying to push each other's buttons or anything like that. They understand that it is within the concept of a game. It is a concept where the conspiracy is more amorphous, and it's not trying to really say anything specific about any current event.
Makes a lot of sense. So kind of let's jump into, because we talked about like the game conceptually and the game in theory. Let's talk about into the actual game, right? So as a player opens this up and they hit play, right? So what is kind of this gameplay loop people should be expecting while going through this? I'm assuming it's a lot more than just watching, as you said, FMV videos or videos kind of like that. Like, what does they do?
Yeah, so the gameplay is actually quite new. There isn't really much like it. It's inspired by games like Plague Inc. So you would have your world map. The first thing you would do is select which region of the world you want to enter. So, let's enter, let's say, Eastern Africa. And inside of Eastern Africa, you would see the different kinds of units already in place. Now, these units are not your typical like tanks or archers or anything of the sort. It's not a real-time strategy game. Basically, the units here represent the influential members of society. So they can be generals, celebrities, journalists, and they exist within a ranking where you have, say your common criminal does not have as much weight as your mob boss. And the player, these all exist in a network that are connected to each other. The player's job is to investigate each of these units, gather information, see how they are connected to each other, and then start converting them to your side, to your faction, as you try to work your way up to the leader of a region. Once you've conquered the leader, the region then becomes your faction. At the same time, there are other secret societies out there that are trying to do the same thing. Plus, the nation itself will try and respond. So you will have to deal with their counteractions to what you're doing. The way you capture a unit is not necessarily by lowering their HP. That's not something that exists in the game. It's much more about trying to overcome them in the different stats that the game has. So each unit has 3 stats. It has bravery, charm, and resources. And for example, if you have a unit that has more resources than another, then you're able to bribe them. And once they've been bribed, they're converted to your side. If they're more charming, then they're able to seduce them. And so on and so forth. Units also have supporting abilities. So, for example, a journalist can do an embarrassing scoop on a specific unit, a specific target, which will lower their bravery as they feel they're being harassed. And that means that a third unit can come in and then intimidate them to joining your faction.
So it feels. So one of the things that I think it feels like, at least to me, to explain that is, it feels like there's a lot there, right? And it really sounds like you spent a lot of time, obviously, making the system dense. How have you also tried to make that system accessible to newer players? Because obviously, I think a lot of games kind of, I don't know, similar to yours, but like games, you said Plague Inc. Plague Inc, I think, is a fine example of a game that at its core is actually super complicated, but it's super accessible for someone to like just start playing it.
Yeah, no, it's been actually really hard to boil it down to a simple system. It is still, that is still the thing that I struggle the most with. I've been reworking the tutorial. I think I don't know how many times I've worked on the tutorial. I'm going to do another animation on it. And I've also been iterating quite a bit on the UX side of things and how information is portrayed in the panels. I do think it is important for players to have information accessible whenever they need it, because at the end of the day, that's strategy, and that is the ultimate resource. Sure, you have like other resources like funds and intel, but the most important thing players have is information, what they know. And as you say, it does become a lot, especially if you have larger networks with tons of different units. And it is something that I'm just continuously iterating on.
Ever have an early play test where like you'd give this off to a player and they'd be like, I have no clue what's happening?
Yeah. Especially early on. Pre-pandemic, I would take a game to our local. We had a monthly event called Fair Windy where developers from around Vancouver get together in a bar and just kind of chat, show off what they're working on. And it's a great place to play test. So I would bring my laptop. I would see how players are playing then. During the pandemic, obviously, that had to stop. But what I've done is I've been able to manage this Discord community where people gave continuous feedback on the game from early on. And these are generally people that are already interested in the genre, and I'm aware of that, as opposed to just random passersby. But it is a bit of a niche genre, and I do think that as important as it is to make it accessible, there are things that it is made for people that are more or less familiar with strategy games, with 4X or grand strategy games as well, and seeing what the tropes of those genres are. So a really simple example is moving the map. Like in the game, you use your mouse, you hold down the mouse button, and that allows you to drag the map, which is really common in strategy games. However, when I've tested it with people that are more not familiar with strategy games, that like platformers or they like adventure games, that's not something they're familiar with. So I will add like a little panel that says click the map to drag, but there are things that I am not going to be able to completely explain.
No, that makes sense. I definitely agree that that the strategy game, especially some more hardcore strategy games, have that inherent like, no, this is the audience we're going for. But I'm kind of curious. So I think, and I agree with you, complexity is good. The issue becomes complexity for complexity's sake, and I think that's a trapping that I think like Paradox games fall into. Like they're just complex, and sometimes it feels that it's just for the sake of saying we're complex. How have you kind of watched that? Is it like how you talked about, like, oh, units just really have 3 stats on them versus like 20? Is it like, are those kind of the ways you're kind of watching that balance of like making sure complexity matters, but like you're not just complex to say you're complex?
Actually, the game started from a simpler version and started increasing complexity. So I'm not trying to make like a complex game and then cut it down, but it's the other way around. Like in the early prototypes, units only had 1 stat, and it was just like generic power. And then you would have a more powerful unit, and what happens is that you would have a very powerful unit that would just steamroll against everybody. So like, okay, we can't have 1. And that's how it started adding more and just slowly adding complexity to it. There are, for example, you could say easy wins in terms of the gameplay that I'm not implementing because they just increase complexity. A good example of this, and actually I did do a prototype of it back in the day, is right now, if you think of 2 units as being connected, right? They have a line, they're connected to each other, they know each other in the game's universe, and that's how they can affect each other. In one of the earlier prototypes, one unit was able to not just affect the units that were connected to them, but was able to affect the units that were connected to the one that's connected. So basically hop around. The problem is that then this becomes really hard to predict what any action is going to do, because it's not just affecting one connection down the line, it's affecting 2, 3 connections down the line. And in a tightly knit network, that could mean that it starts circling around to places you don't expect. So even though the implementation is there, even though it is conceptually simple to understand, it's just affecting a radius of 2 units around it, I am not going to implement that. And it's not going to be in the final game because the complexity of the gameplay just raises too much.
So that makes a lot of sense of that weird fun balance. So as we're talking, and you kind of talked right beforehand, is the game enters a state of early access. We'll say soonish, right? We're gonna put a pin on that. We'll say soonish because you still, I think it sounds a little unknown. What can players expect going into this early access version versus what can they expect 6 months or a year from the line from early access?
The game is mostly feature complete. Really, you can play the whole thing, conquer the whole world. What I really want to do with early access is to be able to help balance the game, get more information from a wider pool of players of, okay, where does it become too difficult? In terms of expectations or like feature-wise, the one that I think that is still, I want to implement that is still not implemented, well, it exists in a simple version, but the beta test has proven that it's not currently easily understandable. It's not functioning as we would like it to do. So is the ability to, once you've conquered a nation, being able to use that nation's resources, nation's abilities in order to influence future regions. So, for example, let's say you're working on Eastern Africa, you've conquered Eastern Africa, and then you can ask Eastern Africa to launch an embargo on Western Africa that will make it easier for you when you enter that region. Adding a little bit of more progression and what I call those national abilities is something that I want to do during early access. But as I said, my main focus is on balancing, is on bug fixing. Because as awesome as the community has been so far, it's just not as many players as there are out there with different kinds of setups, different kinds of machines.
Sounds like a lot of those kind of changes. I'm actually kind of curious. So balance obviously is a big one, and every game has this problem. How are you going to handle that from an early access point of view of like players with progression? Are you just going to, like, when you push out updates, be like, hey, I'm sorry, we're going to wipe save files? Or is it going to be like, oh, if you start a new game, you'll kind of notice these changes versus, like, a game that's already started?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it depends on what exactly needs to be balanced. For example, if it's something as... taking a step back, in the game there's a concept called exposure, which is how much does the world know about your doings. If it's something as simple as exposure, how much exposure you get when you say fail an ability or when you fail a region, that is something that could probably even be balanced live. Like even within your current game, the next time you enter a region, that would be balanced. However, if it's something that is more integral to the game, let's say the number of connections a certain unit can have, then that would happen on the next new game that you have. The question about wiping data is something that I'm not really comfortable with. Like if you've already started the game, I think that it is worthwhile for you to finish the game, even if the balance is not correct. If it's it would be clearly communicated to the player that things have changed, and it's up to them to decide if they want to start off with a new direction or they just want to finish off with what they have.
Okay, perfect. So Ra, to finish this off, a lot of times, I'm going to give you kind of the next couple minutes. What is your closing pitch to people? Why should they go check this out? Like, what is your closing elevator pitch for this game?
Well, if you guys are strategy players and you're interested in something that is general, if you want to play as some other kind of entity, if you want to see what it's like to be in a secret society, to be the one, the quote-unquote evil influence, then come check out this game. This is a game that has different kinds of mechanics that you're not used to. It is challenging. It'll make you think in ways that you're not accustomed to in other strategy games. And it is a different kind of experience. So if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, come check out Puppet Master, the Shadow Government Simulator on Steam. You can wishlist now, and it is coming really soon, in the next couple of months.
Thank you for taking your time this morning to talk about the game, and I look forward to it as it comes out. Best of luck to finishing your last month-ish or so of development.
Thanks, Mike. It was awesome talking to you.
This podcast was a production of the SWW Show. To learn more, go to theswwshow.com. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at the SWW Show. You can follow me at Mikey_Maroney. You can follow AJ at LowSeatBoy. Remember, new episodes premiere on Friday, 9 a.m. Central Time on anchor.fm/SWW and podcast services around the globe.